Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I came home on a Friday evening to the kind of laugh that tells you someone stopped seeing you as a person a long time ago. She was leaning against the counter, sipping her usual Starbucks drink, scrolling her phone like she was auditioning for a life I was never meant to be part of. I told her we should spend the weekend together, maybe take a drive, maybe try to fix whatever had been slipping between us. She didn't even look up. She just said she already had plans and that I shouldn't stress because she had someone to spend the weekend with. Then she laughed again. That slow, dismissive sound that hits harder than shouting. The kind that says you're not even competition anymore. My name is Mike Harper, 38 years old, carpenter by trade. I build things with my hands. Porches, staircases, frames that hold up entire houses. I've never been the loud one in the room, never needed to be. I come home tired, steady, predictable. Maybe that was the problem for her. Maybe predictability doesn't play well in advertising, where she spent her days with people who thought attention was currency. Her someone wasn't a mystery. Kyle, from her sales department. A guy who lived off cheap suits and louder stories. The kind of man who measured himself by how many laughs he could steal at office happy hours. I'd known him for years, mostly because he made a point of pushing every button I had. He envied anyone who didn't need an audience. And now she had picked him. Not for love, not even for lust, but because she knew exactly how much I despised him. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand details or explanations. Instead, I sat on the edge of our couch, the one we'd bought during a weekend sale at Walmart, and let the silence settle. Something quiet and sharp took root inside me. I noticed the Hulu menu still paused on some show she'd insisted we watch together weeks ago. We hadn't finished a single episode since. By the time she grabbed her purse and said she'd be gone all weekend, I already knew I wasn't going to be here when she came back. I took the keys to my Toyota Camry from the hook by the door, walked out without a sound, and didn't bother closing the door gently behind me. I spent that first hour driving with no destination, letting the road absorb the noise I refused to make. The car felt like a refuge, a narrow strip of silence between me and the life I'd just stepped out of. I didn't check my phone. I didn't wonder where she was. I already knew. Kyle lived for weekends like this, bragging in the office kitchen about his plans, laughing too loudly at his own jokes. She used to roll her eyes at him. Now she was with him. A choice made not out of desire, but calculation. A deliberate strike meant to land where it would actually hurt. By the time I pulled into an empty lot behind a closed hardware store, a plan had already started forming. Not revenge, not confrontation, something cleaner, something final. I sat there in the dark, watching the glow of her Starbucks cup still in my memory, the way she dismissed me with a flick of her wrist. People like her thrived on reaction. They fed on conflict. So I decided she wouldn't get any. I opened the browser on my phone and pulled up Craigslist. I typed in rentals, limiting the search to places available immediately. I found 3 listings within an hour's drive, small spaces, nothing fancy. All I needed was a room, 4 walls, and a door she would never walk through. I made 2 calls, setting appointments for the next morning. Short conversations. I didn't offer explanations, and none were asked for. After that, I drove back to the apartment. Not to talk, not to wait, just to see the space one more time before I erased myself from it. She wasn't home yet. Good. The silence inside felt different now, like a stage waiting for the last scene of a performance no one knew was ending. The Hulu screen was still paused where we had left it. I stood there for a minute, looking at it, realizing how long we'd been pretending to share a life. I started packing in complete quiet. Clothes first, then tools, then the notebooks where I sketched out designs for jobs. Essentials only. No noise, no rush, no hesitation. It felt like muscle memory, the same controlled focus I used on job sites. By midnight, half my life was already in bags, loaded into the car. And I hadn't made a single sound. By Saturday morning, the apartment felt less like a home and more like a shell I'd already stepped out of. I didn't sleep much the night before, but exhaustion never touched me. There was a steadiness in my chest I hadn't felt in years, a quiet resolve that made every movement precise. I left early, before she could stumble in with whatever story she and Kyle told themselves. The hallway lights buzzed softly as I carried the last bag to the car. I didn't look back. The first rental I saw was a basement room that smelled like old carpet and disappointment. The second was better, but overpriced. The third was a small upstairs unit above a retired mechanic's garage. Clean walls, decent light, nothing extra. It felt honest. The landlord asked if I could move in immediately. I told him yes. He said he liked straightforward tenants. That was the entire conversation. No questions about why I needed a place on a Saturday morning. Some people understand silence better than explanations. I paid the deposit in cash and made 2 trips to bring my things in. By noon, I had everything I needed stacked neatly in the new space. A mattress, a folding table, my tools, and my notebooks. I didn't bring anything sentimental. Not a photo, not a gift, not a memory. Around 1, I drove to Best Buy and picked up a new prepaid phone. No contract, no shared plan, no trail. The clerk barely looked at me. Good. I activated it from the parking lot, watching the old phone vibrate in the passenger seat with her name lighting up the screen. I powered it off without reading anything. It felt like cutting a wire clean through. On the way back, I stopped at a Walmart for bedding and a cheap coffee maker. Walking through the aisles, listening to the hum of fluorescent lights, I realized how easy it was to rebuild a life when you weren't dragging someone else's chaos behind you. That evening, I returned to the apartment one last time. She still wasn't home. The place looked strangely bigger with my things gone. I placed the keys on the kitchen counter, right next to her half-finished Starbucks cup, left from the night before. No note, no message, no explanation. The silence I left behind was the only answer she was ever going to get. I woke up Sunday in the new place with the kind of clarity that doesn't come from rest, but from finally stopping a slow bleed. The room was plain, quiet, stripped of anything unnecessary. I made coffee with the cheap machine I'd picked up at Walmart the day before, listening to it sputter in the small kitchen area. It was a different kind of morning. No forced small talk. No pretending everything was fine. Just silence and the sound of something new settling into place. My old phone stayed powered off on the table. I didn't touch it. The new one waited next to it, clean and empty, the way the rest of my life felt. I spent the morning unpacking in a methodical way, stacking my tools in the corner, laying out my notebooks, setting up the small space with the same precision I used on job sites. I didn't rush. I didn't think about what she was doing. I didn't think about Kyle. Every time they crossed my mind, it was like watching shadows from a distance, noticeable, but without weight. Around noon, I took the car for a drive. Not far, just enough to feel the road under me and steady my breathing. I passed a Starbucks on the way and didn't stop. I thought about how she used to bring home those cups, leaving half of them on counters, in the car, anywhere but the trash. Somehow those small habits felt louder now than the actual betrayal. Maybe the slow erosion starts long before the loud collapse. By evening, I knew I needed to check the apartment one last time. Not for her. For closure. I drove back and parked without hesitating. The building looked exactly the same as it always had, which somehow made everything feel even more distant. I used the spare key I still had and stepped inside. She was home this time. I heard her running from the bedroom, calling my name in a panicked voice I'd never heard before. She stopped when she saw the empty rooms. Her shoes squeaked against the floor as she moved from corner to corner, as if my things might reappear if she opened enough doors. She turned toward me slowly, eyes wide, whispering that she didn't understand what happened. But I did. For the first time in years, I did. And I didn't say a word. She kept staring at the empty apartment like the walls had betrayed her. The panic in her eyes didn't come from losing me. It came from losing control. She whispered that she didn't think I'd take it so seriously, that she had just needed space, that I was overreacting. Those were her words, spoken in fragments, drifting toward me like smoke that couldn't find a place to settle. I didn't answer. Silence has a weight people only feel when it finally gets directed at them. She followed me through the living room, insisting she hadn't actually stayed with Kyle the whole weekend, that I was misinterpreting things. I could tell she wasn't sure what story would work yet. She just kept throwing out pieces, waiting for one to stick. She said she had grabbed a few things from Walmart on Friday and stayed in a hotel alone, thinking it would calm her down. Even she didn't sound convinced. I walked past her into the kitchen, where the keys still lay on the counter exactly where I'd left them. Her Starbucks cup from Friday had collapsed on its side, leaking a syrupy stain across the laminate. That felt fitting. I picked up the keys, placed them gently in the drawer where we used to keep takeout menus, and closed it. Final. She asked what that meant. I still didn't speak. Instead, I opened the drawer beneath it and removed the last small thing I'd left behind, one of my sketch notebooks wedged in the back. She watched my hands like the notebook might tell her something I wouldn't. When I tucked it under my arm and headed for the door, she tried stepping in front of me, demanding that I stop and talk like adults. But adults don't laugh in their partner's face on Friday and ask for calm on Sunday. I brushed past her without touching her, without acknowledging the tremor in her voice. The hallway outside felt cooler, sharper, like fresh air after a long time breathing something stale. She followed me as far as the threshold, but didn't cross it. Maybe she finally understood she was no longer part of where I was going. As I walked away, I heard her call my name one last time. It sounded small in the empty apartment. My silence swallowed it whole. I didn't look back as I walked down the hallway. The building felt different now, like the air had shifted sides, and I was finally standing on the right one. Outside, the daylight had thinned into that late afternoon gray that always reminded me of unfinished jobs. I got into the car, closed the door gently, and let the quiet settle over me again. It felt earned. It felt necessary. I didn't turn on music or check my phone. Instead, I watched the entrance of the building through the windshield, knowing she would eventually come running out. She always followed noise, attention, motion. Silence confused her. When she finally stepped outside, she scanned the parking lot like she expected an argument waiting for her. I stayed still. The car idled, low and steady, giving nothing away. She took a few hesitant steps toward me, but stopped when she realized I wasn't opening the door, wasn't rolling down the window, wasn't giving her even a single word to work with. She called out that she hadn't meant what she'd said on Friday, that Kyle had exaggerated, that she had only been trying to wake me up. I just watched her in the rearview mirror, her reflection small and distorted. Then I shifted into drive and pulled away without accelerating. There was no rush, only distance. Back at the new place, I unpacked the last bag and set the cheap coffee maker from Walmart onto the counter. A quiet Saturday purchase for a life that was already taking shape. The new phone buzzed once, an automated setup notification, and went silent again. That was the only sound in the room. I liked it that way. By early evening, I'd settled into a rhythm. I made notes for upcoming jobs, sketched out a frame design, and let my hands fall into familiar work. That steadiness was something she never understood. The world she lived in needed constant stimulation. Office gossip, endless scrolling, shows playing on Hulu she barely watched. Noise for noise's sake. Around 9, the old phone, still powered off on the table, began to vibrate from its battery, trying to die. A faint, dull rattle. Her last attempt to reach something that no longer existed. I opened the window, let the cold air in, and listened to the quiet take over everything again. By Monday morning, the world outside my window felt sharper, cleaner, like someone had wiped down the edges of everything I used to overlook. I woke before sunrise, made coffee, and sat at the small table in my new kitchen. The routine felt unfamiliar but right, like stepping into boots that finally fit. I didn't check the old phone. Didn't need to. The silence around it told me everything. I drove to a job site across town, the car humming steadily beneath me. Work had always been the one place where noise made sense, saws cutting through lumber, hammers striking clean. But even there, something in me stayed colder, quieter, like I'd shifted into a different version of myself overnight. The kind you don't back away from once you finally meet him. Around noon, during a break, I checked the new phone. 12 missed calls from an unknown number, then a text saying she'd gone by the apartment and found it empty. She wrote that she didn't understand why I'd run off, that she wanted to fix things, that Kyle didn't mean anything. The last part made me laugh once, a dry sound with no humor in it. People like her always called the fire an accident once the damage showed. I didn't respond. Instead, I stopped at Best Buy on the way back to the new place and bought a small Bluetooth speaker. Nothing special, just enough to fill the room with a bit of background sound when I needed it. As I walked out with the bag in hand, I realized how easy it was to build a life piece by piece when you weren't waiting for someone else to show up for it. By late afternoon, she found my new number. I knew because the phone buzzed once, then again, then again. I let it ring out each time. When she finally left a voicemail, Her voice cracked in a way I'd never heard before. She said she'd gone to work, and people were whispering. She said Kyle had told everyone it wasn't serious, that he hadn't promised her anything. The humiliation in her voice was sharp, trembling. She asked me to call her. Said she needed me. Needed something solid again. I stared at the phone, let the message play out, and set it face down on the table. The quiet answered for me. By Tuesday morning, the messages shifted tone. The early ones were panicked, scattered. But the later ones sounded different. Controlled, careful, as if she'd finally realized emotional chaos wouldn't pull me back. That was always her method. Drown the room in noise until I stepped in to quiet it. Now the noise had nowhere to go. I spent most of the morning reorganizing tools at the new place, stacking them against the far wall the way I liked them. Clean, predictable, ready. The quiet in that room felt earned, not accidental. Every so often, the new phone buzzed again. I didn't check it. It wasn't discipline. It was instinct. Some things don't deserve a reaction. Around noon, my foreman called about a framing project on the south side of town. I drove over, letting the steady hum of the car ground me. Being on a job site helped. Measuring, cutting, aligning, things that didn't lie, didn't laugh in your face, didn't run off for a weekend with someone who existed solely to get attention. My hands moved with the same deliberate calm I'd used when clearing out the apartment. One measured act after another. Quiet construction. Quiet removal. When I finally checked the new phone during a break, she had sent a long message. She said she'd learned Kyle had already moved on to someone else from their office, bragging loudly that he never promised her anything serious. She wrote that people were laughing behind her back, that she felt humiliated, exposed. And then she said she realized I'd always been the one solid thing in her life, the one person who didn't require an audience to be worth something. I looked at the words for a long moment, then locked the screen. On the drive home, I passed that same Starbucks we used to stop at on weekends. She had loved those runs, using them as chances to talk about work drama I never asked for. I didn't pull in. The place meant nothing now, just another background detail of a life that no longer existed. Back at the new apartment, I set the Bluetooth speaker from Best Buy on the table, played a soft instrumental track, and let the room fill with something steady. Then I powered off the phone again. The silence felt like strength, not absence. By Thursday, something in her messages shifted again. The panic was gone. The humiliation was fading. What remained was calculation, the same quiet precision she'd used on Friday when she laughed in my face. She said she wanted to talk, calmly, that we owed each other a conversation. She added that she was willing to meet anywhere I felt comfortable. Her words were measured now, deliberate. It was the tone of someone who finally realized silence wasn't a phase. It was a decision. I let the new phone buzz until it stopped. Then I set it aside and went back to the small project I'd started the night before, building a narrow shelving unit for the kitchen. Something simple, something clean. The kind of work that kept my hands steady and my mind clear. The woodshop's smell grounded everything. With each cut and sanded edge, the life I'd left behind felt smaller, like a room shrinking behind a closed door. Around lunch, I drove out to a supplier to pick up a few boards. I passed the old apartment on the way. I didn't slow down. The building looked the same, quiet balconies, sun-faded siding, but it had nothing to do with me anymore. On the return drive, I stopped by a Starbucks, not for nostalgia, but for caffeine. While waiting in line, I saw a couple laughing together over weekend plans. It struck me how different laughter sounds when it isn't meant to cut someone down. Back at the new place, I finished assembling the shelves, wiped down the sawdust, and stepped back to look at them. They weren't perfect, but they were mine, built in silence and intention. When the phone buzzed again, I checked the message only because it was shorter than the rest. She wrote that she'd stopped by the apartment again and noticed the Hulu account was still logged in on the TV. She said it made her think maybe I hadn't fully walked away. I powered on the old phone just long enough to sign out remotely. Then I shut it down and placed it in the back of a drawer. As evening settled in, I brewed a cup of coffee and set it on the new shelf. The space felt different now, more mine than hers, more present than past. The quiet wasn't just holding, it was growing. By Friday morning, a full week after her laughter pushed everything over the edge, the messages stopped. Not because she'd run out of things to say, but because she finally understood I wasn't going to break the silence for her. People like her survive on echoes, arguments, apologies, explanations. When the echoes disappear, they're left staring at their own reflection. That's what silence does. It forces truth out of hiding. I woke early, made coffee, and opened the window to let in the cool air. The new shelving unit held exactly what I needed and nothing more. Every part of this place was starting to feel like a room I'd chosen, not a room I'd escaped into. The quiet had shape now. Edges. Wait. It didn't feel like emptiness anymore. It felt like structure. Around mid-morning, I drove across town to finish a framing job we'd started earlier in the week. My hands moved with a confidence I hadn't felt in months. There was no fog in my head, no tightness in my chest, no waiting for the next emotional twist from someone who treated unpredictability like a personality trait. Just clean lines, straight measurements, solid beams. The kind of truth you can hold in your hands. When I got back to the apartment, the new phone was buzzing. A single message. She said she'd gone to HR at work to file a complaint against Kyle after learning he'd been bragging about their weekend. She wrote that he laughed at her, told her she'd taken it too seriously, that he never wanted anything real. She added that people were whispering, that she felt judged, abandoned, embarrassed. She ended the message by saying she finally understood why my silence hurt more than any argument could. I set the phone on the counter and let the message sit there unread. As the sun started to set, I stepped outside and leaned against the railing, watching the street grow darker. A week ago, I'd walked out of our apartment with nothing but a few bags and a decision. Now I stood here with something heavier and far more stable. My own life, rebuilt from the ground up, without noise, without apologies. Inside, the Bluetooth speaker from Best Buy hummed softly. The Hulu account was long disconnected. The old phone stayed buried in a drawer. The coffee maker from Walmart gurgled quietly, steady as a heartbeat. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel like the end of something. It felt like the beginning. Been through it. When they crossed a line, and you made sure they felt it.